Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. This is Leanne Trans from NOVIDEA. I'll just let everybody, I can see people joining. We'll give them another minute or two, and then we'll get started. Okay, great. I think we can get started. So welcome again. I'm going to hand you over to our host, Ben Potts, to take us through the webinar. Ben, let's get started.
Hi, thanks, Leanne. Hopefully everyone can see me. And thanks for attending this afternoon. We've got a good attendance today for our webinar, Broken the Cloud, What is True Cloud? As well as introduction, we've been talking to our customers and prospects across the market, both in the UK and globally. And everyone's getting to a point where they realize they need to be on cloud. It's a board directive to move systems on cloud, but there's often the question of, what is cloud and what is true cloud? So on this webinar today, we'll discuss where you are in your journey today, where you actually are compared to where you think you are, and where you could be. So in a little while, we'll be asking you to do a poll where we'll capture, your thoughts of where you are today. And laterally on the end of the webinar, there'll be a follow-up poll just to see if your thoughts and views have changed throughout this session. So at the centre of this webinar, we have a paper produced by Craig Beaketty and one of his colleagues at CELENT. Craig's a senior analyst, and the paper that he wrote was grading cloud-based propositions from 1 to 8. And the rationale of CELENT was that there's lots of people in the market claiming to be cloud technology, and there's lots of misunderstanding around what cloud technology is. So if I can pass over to Craig now, dive in. Craig, could you just in layman's terms, just give you an overview of your paper?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for inviting me to be here as well. Good to speak with you again, Ben. So welcome everyone. Let me just quickly show the slide up here. It'll perhaps make things clearer. So at CELENT, we spend a lot of time evaluating technology used within the insurance industry. And just like a decade ago, when everyone was claiming their software was SOA enabled, if you remember that trend, today we're increasingly finding that everyone is saying that their software is cloud. And actually more specifically, they're saying it's cloud native. So one of the things we tried to do while we were looking at this and helping our clients and working with some of the vendors, trying to distinguish between what does cloud native really mean, and actually where are the advantages there? And we were trying to look at what are some of the trade-offs with that. And that's where we came up with these 8 tiers, if you like, these 8 distinct places where something is either on-premise or it's in the cloud, but there are some significantly different characteristics of those systems. So if I walk through them from bottom to top just quickly. So one, we've got on-premise legacy, which is a challenge for most brokers, most insurers out there. We've all got systems, or many of us have systems that are perhaps disabling change within the organization. Tier 2 there, we've got on-premise. So these are systems that are perhaps a little more modern, but still on-premise. And what we wanted to try and do was distinguish here between 2 and 3. So 3 says hosted on the cloud. So this is where an application has been built. It could be deployed on-premise, but actually it's just been moved into the cloud. And you get some of the benefits of the cloud by just shifting things into the cloud. But actually, as we'll go through the rest of the tiers, you don't get all of the benefits from the cloud, and it doesn't require much of a culture change. It doesn't require a shift in thinking. It's really just putting it on somebody else's server, as many people paraphrase the cloud to be in the past. So we go up again, we've got an enterprise cloud native. Now, there's a number of organizations out there that are looking at building cloud environments that are intended to be used by a larger enterprise and try and solve some of the problems for those larger enterprises. And you can move things into the cloud there, but it's typically not, it's typically still something that was built with on-premise in mind. It's still using some of those old ways of thinking about how you build applications, how you deliver software, how you engage with software. But it's improving, right? Typically there's some idea about getting some of that agility, getting some of that speed of change in there as well. Then as we move up, we've got open source cloud native. There's a number of folks out there in larger organizations across all industries who are looking at building their applications and moving them into the cloud. And they've contributed a lot of software to the broader community in order to enable them to do that. And actually you and the insurance industry, brokers can take advantage of that and start to leverage some of those open source libraries. And certainly we've seen some of the vendors to the insurance industry adopt those and use those as a catalyst, as a way of getting into the cloud. Then we start to see this idea of cloud tide. So when you start to look at things like how the different cloud providers are providing technology to the, all industries, they're trying to differentiate amongst themselves. They're leveraging or creating new features which are specific to their cloud. And actually what we were trying to articulate here was that some of the vendors are leveraging some of those capabilities from a particular cloud, stuck to that cloud, but they're going a little deeper. So they can't operate on premise anymore. That's one of the key differences there. And they can't operate in other clouds, but they're getting deeper in there. And because of that, they're getting more productivity out of their investment and perhaps greater agility. We'll talk about some of that as trade-offs as we go through the session today, and we'll hear from some of the other speakers as well. And then we got into serverless applications. So this is a real step change, actually, as you start to move from 6 and below into 7. Typically, when you're thinking about 6 and stuff like that, and below, you're still thinking about how many machines do I need? How do I organize the machines? How do I stitch them together? You might, as you get above 5, be thinking about containerization and things like that. And I realize very technical term there, I apologize. But here, as you start to get into 7 and 8, you're no longer worrying about what machine's running it. You're just worrying about what is the business functionality I'm trying to deliver that is going to make a difference for my business. And that's the real difference here. And then as we get into extreme cloud native, what we call tier 8 here, we're really very, very focused on what's the optimal way to deliver the business functionality, the business capability, that differentiating feature within technology that in the most optimal way, if you like. And we'll get into this a little bit as we go through the conversation here as well. So that gives you some idea of I mean, the huge variance in models when people come in and knock on the door and they say, we've got a cloud native solution for you that will solve your business problems. Actually, that's not differentiating anymore. There's lots of different ways in which cloud can be delivered, can be thought about, can offer capabilities and agility to the insurance industry, to brokers in particular, and it can be delivered in different ways. Ben, did I cover that well enough? Any questions from you there?
I think you did a pretty good job, Craig. Thank you very much. Hopefully that's clear to everyone, and you know, we will be sharing some information on this after the webinar as well. I think now, as I promised, we're going to put up a poll. We're really interested to see where you think your companies are now on a scale of 1 to 8, bearing in mind what Craig's just said, and where you should be heading. So this should hopefully be interactive, and if we'll leave you just a few seconds to be able to make your selections.
Okay, great. I think we've closed the poll now.
That's very interesting. So Ben, a lot of folks there on hosted on the cloud, so at least making the shift into the cloud. Very few there on premise. Some differentiating and saying they're enterprise cloud native. They're moving into something that's a little bit beyond just lifting and shifting into the cloud. And a few folks saying they're cloud tied. Be interesting to hear from them later on as well.
And there's a second poll as well, Ben, that we're going to run. So where do you think your company should be heading?
I think this should be very interesting. So there seems to be a lot of work to do in the insurance industry. I think you'll see there, Ben. A lot of folks are looking to certainly move up the tiers. Some real interest there in cloud tied and serverless applications as well.
Yes, and I know later on we're going to cover in this webinar. It's great that everyone's ambitions is to move towards an 8, and there's a large number of there between 6 and 8. But it's also the conversation around, does your whole business need to be on an 8? What aspects of your business needs to be 8 as well? So we'll get onto that later. And obviously, as we're going through this session, we have the chat on the webinar. So if people have questions, do key them in there, and we'll have some time at the end to address them. And if we run out of time, we'll make sure we respond to those questions.
Excellent, excellent, cool, and very interesting. I think to see that the folks attending are not afraid to be tied to a particular cloud as well. They want to get deeper and engaged in that. So. Perhaps we move on, and I'll ask you a few questions around the NOVIDEA solution, Ben. That'd be okay?
Yeah, definitely. If you stop sharing your screen, it'd be good to see you again, Craig.
Cool, excellent. So, Ben, how do you think that NOVIDEA aligns to that model that we just saw in terms of where it positions itself and how cloud native the NOVIDEA solution is?
Yeah, so we won't focus on NOVIDEA today. I suppose having the webinar is an opportunity just to sort of show where we are. From a technology perspective, we chose to build on Salesforce its entirety. So you can obviously go several ways. One's in building your own cloud applications. The other's to take something like a Salesforce and develop your product in there. So, in doing so, that made us a Cloud 8 by your reckoning. And that just gives us huge capability in terms of performance, scalability, flexibility, the ability to quickly develop and make changes to our systems. So it puts us in a very, very strong position.
Excellent, excellent. And can you explain some of the key aspects of what was important within Cloud 8 to enable things like broker on the move and some of the other topics you've covered in the earlier webinars as well?
Yeah, thanks. So broking on the move's an important thing for us at NOVIDEA. I think the pandemic and everyone home working has really put a spotlight onto technology in the market, and we're seeing more e-trades, more trades on white space, just more electronic, of what was traditionally people solving problems. And I think the world will change. We're seeing that in people who are approaching us. It's not about working at home necessarily, but it's around, how do I reduce the number of people in my London office? Do I need that many people in a London office? And why can't my brokers work at customers' offices and airports and wherever they want to? So that broking on the move is really important to us. And Cloud 8, obviously there's various benefits as you go through the different grades, but being truly Cloud 8 just gives several things. It allows us very easily to allow huge numbers of users to have highly performant access to the platform. On tablets, mobiles, whatever that is. With the investments Salesforce makes from a compliance and security, You know, that sort of cloud-8 infrastructure just gives you security that's probably unprecedented if you try to invest in that yourself. And then so to take on a scalability and performance and the ability to access it, it's the ability to integrate with other ecosystems, it's the ability of low code to develop on the cloud. And that's it. If you can access your platform anywhere, you can get access of data from a multitude of systems on clouds all in one place, and you're able to act fast and configure quickly. It gives you a really powerful capability as the world's changing and people are going to be much more mobile.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So likewise, Craig, going back to your part, I've had lots of our customers and prospects concern themselves around tying themselves down to one cloud. Now, we're based upon Salesforce, and it's got its own ecosystem. But that said, we're fully aware that especially some of the larger brokers we deal with, they have a much more complexity, data residency, different territories, and they like to entertain the idea of multiple clouds, but there's always questions and misconceptions that arise from that.
Absolutely. And I think that was one of the key features here. I mean, what we were seeing was, we talked a little bit about the kind of sell side, the vendors coming in and saying we're cloud native, and meaning a plethora of different things when they were talking about that. But also, we were seeing in the insurance industry, MGAs, brokers, insurers coming back to the vendors and asking for cloud native. And actually, they were meaning different things as well. And I think multi-cloud is one of those areas where there's a significant amount of difference. Sometimes people are looking for a solution, much like in our poll, the majority of people there really looking for something that was going deep onto a particular cloud. But you're right, there's a class of folks out there who are worried that it's not clear who will win the cloud race, that maybe someone will step out ahead. But there's a trade-off there. The real question here is around, what do you want to control? What do you want to have power over? And that might be the ability to shift between different cloud providers. And actually, but what are you willing to take on in terms of work in order to make that happen? So going multi-cloud means that you have to have within your organization the capability to, you're still thinking about service, you're thinking about containerization. You have to have an approach where you understand what the different cloud providers are doing, and you have to put in place the people and the technology and all of that effort in order to make sure that you can control that, understand that, and deliver that at a reasonable level with the partners that you've chosen. And that's fine maybe for a massive multinational organization with a huge IT department with an interest in that. But it's not going to be for everyone in the insurance industry, quite frankly. And the other side to this is you have to ask yourself, to be honest, my background is in architecture. I'm coming out with some technical terms. Hopefully I'm not losing everyone. But I tend to think of myself as a pragmatist. And you have to think about, will being multi-cloud, will owning this stuff, putting that investment in the people and the technology be a differentiator for me? Now, if I'm a very big broker and I'm selling software to other people, maybe that's the case. But actually, if I'm a broker and I'm servicing a particular set of clients, I'm really good at a particular niche and I'm very customer focused, being multi-cloud is not going to be differentiating for you. It's not something that your customers are going to care about. It's not something that's actually going to differentiate you in the market. But absolutely, there are folks out there who are going to be interested in being multi-cloud. Not for everyone.
Exactly. Thanks, Craig. And another question we get is, how do you know which companies are cloud? Because everybody says they're cloud at the moment, and being cloud can either be that you're, truly cloud, where there is only one product and it's configured and it sits on that infrastructure, or it could be your old software on a server somewhere that somebody else looks after. It varies greatly, but people never put that granularity around what is cloud with their products. So when you're looking at your company as an IT director or a COO who's looking at the futures, what should they be looking at?
Absolutely. I mean, this is exactly the challenge we were having, right? Everyone was saying they're cloud and cloud native. Everyone was saying we need a cloud native system. and you'd put them together in a room, and it would turn out that what one side meant by cloud native was not the same as what the other side meant. And it was sort of, well, how do we navigate this? I think some of the standard questions that people ask in the RFI, or RFPs, or due diligence, or just over a cup of coffee, give you some of those answers, right? The technical answer that somebody talks to you about, if they're talking about servers, if they're talking about how they organize those things, that gives you some hints as to where people are. If they talk about particular implementations within AWS or within Azure, that gives you an idea of, are they tied? If they're talking about containers, that gives you an idea again. If they don't mention servers at all, if they talk about delivering through configuration of an underlying cloud platform, that gives you a set of answers as well. And I'm sure when Ben's responded to these RFPs and these queries as well, a lot of the answers that Ben would give would be, have a look at Salesforce. Salesforce handle the security. Salesforce handle data residency. That gives you an answer as well. And this is it's an important question, I think, for anyone who's looking at this kind of, trying to find a software provider. What do you want the software provider spending their time on? Do you want the software provider concerning themselves with the latest containerization technology and trying to make sure that they're GDPR compliant, that they're PSDA compliant, that they're satisfying all these things? Or do you want them focused on delivering meaningful business change, business capability to you as their customer?
Okay, thanks, Craig. And let's dig a little bit deeper there. What sort of, so that's looking around and and looking for signs of the level of cloud that they're on. But what sort of questions directly should people be asking their vendors around what their vision is, what their investment is, how are they investing, and where are they investing? Because you talk there around security, compliance in GDPR. There's lots of different areas to invest into cloud as well. It's not it's just not one investment thread.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I was a little waffly there. I haven't given you any specific questions you can go away and ask your software providers, can I? Have I? I think a great question there is who's looking after the servers, right? I mean, that's going to give you some insight into where the responsibility lies. Is it somebody within the software provider who's looking after that? Are they a hardware and software company now? Are they infrastructure? Or are they giving that to somebody who is doing that for lots of other organizations as well? I think another key question here is how is the system built, actually? And this gives you some great insights. It's an exciting question for me as a technologist. And for the guys out on there who are more business focused who are listening, maybe this is somebody from your IT team or a partner that would ask this, but understanding how the system's built and put together. Is it a modern way of doing it? Was it something that was built in sort of 2000 before the cloud even existed? Or is it something that has been built post-cloud, if that makes sense? And then a great question, this is one that I challenge a lot of software providers on, is how quickly can I get access to the system, right? So if I turned around today and I said, that sounds great, Ben, when can I have it? That will give you a great insight into where they are in terms of these tiers. And it actually gives us some insight into what the advantage of moving up those tiers towards extreme cloud native are, actually. If you're in a containerized environment and you're setting up servers and infrastructure and plugging them in together, that's probably going to take weeks, particularly if you're on premise and you're waiting for infrastructure. If you've moved into the cloud, if you're now hosted in the cloud, you can cut that down to hours, maybe days, something like that. If you automate a lot of it and you're moving further up the tiers, you can get it into tens of minutes and hours. But actually, as you get up towards the top, you can get, it becomes a configuration exercise, almost fill in a questionnaire and you get the environment. Those three questions will give you some great insights, and I'm sure as you're looking at different software providers, you'll find lots of other questions as well. But those are probably my top three for working out whereabouts, what's the thinking, what's the vision in terms of where they are in the cloud. And of course, you can take all of those questions and say, what's the answer today? What was the answer 2 years ago? What's the answer going to be in 2 years from now?
Great. No, thank you. Good answer. And I suppose finally, when we did the poll at the start, there was lots of guys there between 1 and 3, mainly 2 and 3, I think. For those wanting to go on a journey to 7 or 8, you know, what was that approach? Because there is yeah, I know when you talk to, we've got Keith from Specialist Risk Group coming on later, and there is an approach of don't go straight to, you can go straight to 8, or there might be a transition period for you as well. But what's your advice for people taking that journey?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And some of this comes down to how prepared are you, how familiar are you with the cloud as well. I mean, a decade ago, back in the early 2010s, everyone was frightened of the cloud, and actually things have moved on. People are pretty pragmatic about it. Within the insurance industry, I think there's a lot of understanding now about how you do the due diligence around cloud and make sure that cloud is appropriate. There's a lot more understanding of what the regulator, if you're in the UK, or the regulators, if you're international, are interested in there, and there's lots of really good guidelines. You can go straight from a legacy on-premise system and migrate to something that's a 7 or 8. And I'm thinking there about sort of the core part of your business. There's lots of bits that help brokers run. So there's a really interesting question about how much of that you want to manage in different ways. But if we think about core broking software, you can go straight from a 1 and a 2 to a 7 or 8 or 6. That was very popular there in the poll earlier. That's really just finding the right provider, finding the right way of doing that migration. Some people prefer to dip their toe, if that makes sense. Take a few things into the cloud, become familiar with it, learn about what works in the cloud and what doesn't. Allow the culture within the organization to change. And there's a change management exercise there as well, right? So there might be some people within your organization who don't think the cloud is right for them. And you can take baby steps. Many of the folks in the insurance industry have gone with Office 365, for instance. And if Excel can work in the cloud, then by crikey, anything can, can't it? But anyway, it takes that baby step, right? You try something out, everyone gets familiar with it, they understand what the different ethos is, and then they start to think, actually, this is possible. So there's no one right way to do it for everyone. But I mean, the simple answer for this, of course, is just find the right partner, and have someone hold your hand while you're getting into the cloud.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And here's a confidence thing. If you look at the kind of the sort of big technology players, the Salesforce and some of those, it goes to your other 7 or 8 where you get great data migration, great data integration tools. And one of the big things with the traditional move is simply migrating from your legacy platform to the cloud. And arguably some of the better technology further up the scale has better tools to allow you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can take your legacy and just get it hosted in the cloud and be present in the cloud, you can be part of the ecosystem there. But what you'll then find is you don't have somebody who's higher up the tree will be faster at responding to those requests for new APIs, new integrations, new digital media, digital means for broking business, for distributing business. So you've gone into the cloud, but you've not quite got all of those benefits. And we'll talk some more about that as we go through the rest of the session today.
Great. Thanks very much, Greg. So we're halfway through the session. Thanks for all the questions that are coming in already. Keep them coming. It'll make the final 10 minutes of the session much more interesting if we do have questions. And we're going to introduce Keith Bucknell, who's the IT and Project Director at Specialist Risk Groups now, and also James Willison, who's the Managing Director of Web Connectivity. I think everyone should know those businesses very well. Specialist Risk Groups always in the news with acquisitions and lots of stuff going on. And James's business, Web Connectivity, being the core of London market messaging and core messaging for many, many years now, and for a go-to provider. So, hi guys, great to have you on board. Firstly, I'll have a few questions for Keith, if that's okay. Yeah, so you're a customer of NOVIDEA. Now you've gone through Craig's model. where would you say SRG align with that that approach, those lines of modelling, and how have you got that to where you've got today, and where do you want to be?
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Ben. Afternoon, everyone. I guess firstly, who knew there was 8 levels would be the first one. If we didn't have this conversation last week, I would have said, "Oh, of course, we're number 8 and we're at the top." But yeah, it's interesting to understand the scale and where the benefits lie with each of them. Where I guess it's fair to say, where were we first? So back in 2017, mid 2017, when I joined, it was very much a on-premise environment, very much certain line of business applications were hosted on premise but with vendors. Some were hosted internally. Some even dated back 19 or 20 years. So what we kind of embarked on there was, I guess if we're calling it numbers, would be really how do we get to number 3? So we first saw the infrastructure as the building blocks. So we, for want of a better word, lifted and shifted our Citrix, our infrastructure, and even some of the legacy applications we've kindly inherited through some recent acquisitions. So we've moved that onto Azure. We've, I guess, commoditized our productivity suite, so fully Office 365 as well, hence the Azure piece, as opposed to everything else. And as we're going through now changing our line of business applications, we have a number of applications that are kind of cloud tiered, and obviously NOVIDEA with you guys up to number 8. I guess where we want to be, it's quite simple, really. My personal mission or vendetta really is to not really have anything in any of our offices that means we're tied to any locations. This was all kind of pre-COVID or pandemics. My background is infrastructure, architecture, and strategy. So it's kind of, we don't want to worry about keeping the lights on. And then when we start looking at applications, we really want that flexibility where we can just plug A to B in very easily, rather than be tied to vendors, have to specify a lot of things, wait 6 months, X amount of costs, get something delivered that's probably not quite right, and then go through that wheel again. I'm strongly of this kind of simplifying. We just need connectors, and we just need things really plugged in, which is where I guess that kind of multi-cloud, cloud to cloud strategies would come in. I think the approach we took has been very much a building block. So infrastructure sorted first, then look at our application stack and our application layer. Some of it, if people ask kind of why is it taking this long, some of it has been delayed because we've acquired brokers, and actually what we've decided to do at that time is lift and shift them onto this new platform as well. And that, looking back now, that stood us in fantastic stead for obviously going into COVID. No disruption, no issues, but all we've really done with a lot of it is just lifted and shifted that legacy to an infrastructure as a service provider.
Okay, thanks very much, Keith. And my next question was going to ask you why you had to do it now, but you probably answered that just there. And I know as a business, SRG is very sort of technology led and see a lot of value in moving the business forward by technology too. Just going back to the cloud though, why do you think building things is quicker in the cloud than the sort of more traditional ways? As you say, lots of businesses, their ambition is a 2 or 3. We've seen on the people on this webinar, it's higher than that, which is great to see. But often it's a 2 or 3. Where do you see the sort of benefits in building in the cloud? As I say, CELENT is saying it's quicker.
Yeah, we when we did the RFI, one of the questions, funnily enough, was around the cloud environments. I think from our point of view, it's not just to Craig's point, when can I have it tomorrow? Here you go, here's an environment. For us, it was more how open and how extensible are those environments, and I call them environments rather than clouds because they could be multi-cloud, etc. But I think from our point of view, there's certain software vendors that have very traditional closed systems. There's some software vendors that are trying to move that legacy to open architecture, open APIs, and then there's more kind of, you know, I don't want to call the pun insurtech type of things, but there's more forward thinking companies that go, actually, it should all be open. It should all be easily integratable to Lloyd's. It should be, you know, why can't we just have a button that just goes straight to PPL or Lloyd's or even whatever the next version is going to be? So the focus for us was, you know, really looking, and still today, even in some other areas, you know, we really want to look at that pure cloud provided. You know, I kind of said it's easier to buy than build ourselves and maintain ourselves, and we really, you know, want to focus on partners where they would do the configuration, but then over time I could build up an internal function or partner with a company where if we wanted new screens, new products, new documents, new workflows, it could be done within our capabilities, and all of that aids to, I guess, the business wanting to deliver things quicker, whether it's acquisitions onboarding, whether it's us building new ideas, new strategy, or more importantly, why don't we try things and do this whole kind of test and learn? You know, let's launch a new product or a new widget or a new portal. If it doesn't work, okay, we've got the capabilities and hopefully the small investment that we can then just cancel that and move on to something else.
Exactly. And there are a lot of the sort of IT operational advantages. How about your, your actual customers and the teams, the business? How are they benefiting from, you know, NOVIDEA and the cloud generally across SRG?
So when we look at the cloud now, we went into COVID with no issues. 18th of March, remember it like it was yesterday. It's been scalable. It's if we wanted to, it's had that always on. So we've flexed up and down for flexible working times and to accommodate people's, you know, home life working environments. The way I see it going forward is access anywhere on any device. You know, at the moment we're to a degree constrained. You have to log into Citrix, you still have your desktop, you still have some legacy, but you know, I just think, you know, and I know Lloyd's tried it years ago with Tom, but actually I do really believe, you know, give a broker an iPad, let him, you know, go in to the local coffee shop post lockdown social distancing, but let him go in there with an iPad rather than a ream of paper and go, okay, let's talk about this. Or even from the carrier side, you know, one sweet spot for me is, why can't we give our carriers certain dashboards to show their performance of that facility or that binder in real time? So for me, it's going to be more flexibility, portability, and then hopefully we can start capturing a lot of data electronically, so we can start analysing and looking at insights from there onwards. Exactly.
Thanks very much. And then I'm going to pass to James now. You've waited patiently, James, for the last 40 minutes. Say hello. Welcome to the webinar. Tell us a bit more about web connectivity and your cloud approach, and you know, where did it start? You know, what were the drivers from your customers to move your business to the cloud?
Sure. So we're a software company founded back in 2003, kind of post or pre kind of cloud days, really. But we're now operating with roughly 80 organizations across 11 different countries in both brokers and carriers as well. And we're looking at anywhere where structured data is being used in the processes of placing data or movement of money, be it premiums or claims or accounting settlement, or then claims management. So clearly back in 2003, every customer of ours took the gateway, took the messaging solution and had that installed on premise. It was the only sort of option that was available to them then. Roll forward to, it was I was just going back through some of our old contracts. It was 2012 when we signed up to a hosting provider, and we started hosting our applications into the cloud. Now, it would be fair to say that was at the time just so we could give customers the options, but at that point it was still very much the preference was for people to take it on premise, but it just gave us another kind of string to the bow that people could use our cloud solutions if they wanted to. If we roll forward to 2020, we now find that the majority of our customers are on the cloud, so they would take our products on the cloud. The vast majority of new customers that are signing up to the messaging solutions are only interested in a cloud solution. Very rarely would we get the request to have it hosted sort of on premise. And us as an organisation ourselves, we're then in the process of, we've been through various kind of cloud providers in the past, but we're just in the process now of transitioning, moving everything into the Microsoft Azure environment, which fits in neatly with us being a Microsoft shop and using Office 365 and some of those benefits we've touched on earlier about how you can sort of very quickly move remotely and given the sort of current situations that we're in.
Thank you. And on terms of, we'll keep going back to Craig's report. Where would you say that web connectivity sit on that scale of 1 to 8?
Well, very similar to Keith. If you'd asked me last week, I'd say we're on cloud 9. I don't know, that's or something kind of similar. Sorry, it's terrible thing. But this clearly caused quite a bit of debate and conversation internally. And so we looked at it in detail. We'd put ourselves now around about kind of a 5+. So we're multi-tenanted. Everyone's always on the latest version. There isn't kind of like different people on different versions of the software. There's no kind of upgrade path as such. All kind of elastic services. People have got the ability to utilize APIs, microservices. We're kind of in a DevOps environment. And our kind of immediate aim is to move that to a kind of 7. So we've got a roadmap in place to get to a 7. We're not quite got the full roadmap to get to an 8 at the moment, but that's not necessarily the kind of the end of the world. I think most customers, when they would come to us, are actually looking for our support to get them to a 3. And I think that they're essentially saying, and that could be an existing customer who's using the software, obviously then in the minority now, but they say, right, we've now got a cloud strategy. We want to kind of lift and shift and take what we've got, move that into the cloud. And I think there's and I think we'll touch on it later, but a bit of a responsibility of kind of educating what those benefits are. And that's why, having materials such as this or the report that Salet have done, just to kind of break that out and put some clarity around it, is kind of really helpful. But the critical thing, I think it's been touched on a few times already, is that regardless of what stage people are at, it can't be done in isolation. It needs to have some connectivity, all form part of an ecosystem. It needs to be connected, and whatever solution you're going to, it can't just be sort of standalone as such.
Exactly. Thank you. I should have said at the start, web connectivity, work with NOVIDEA as for the messaging gateway for our London market customers. That's the relationship there. I've obviously known James for many years. We touched on cloud ecosystems earlier. What does this mean from a business point of view to you? Yeah,
so to my mind, it's all about interconnectivity. So we need to have, and by that I'm really talking about sort of the data. So when you've got systems which are utilizing data, which is from the lifeblood of what's going through them, that data needs to be a kind of a single version of the truth, or you need to have trust within that data, and it needs to be reused without being rekeyed or kind of with manual intervention. So that all sounds fine, but what does that mean in kind of a business context, and how does that interplay with actual systems? So a project that I, for my sins, worked on significantly in the past was contract certainty. That kind of, I normally get booed at that point by various people in the market, but it had a role to play at a point in time. And if we look at contract certainty, that was obviously looking at the certainty around the contractual terms that people are signing up to. What I'm much more interested in now is financial certainty. So you have a contract which is underwritten, and the terms of that contract are known, but the financial terms of that contract are also understood. So the tax implications, the premium implications, which territories is that being written in. So you have, from a placing process, you have that financial certainty. That means you can then, at the end of the placing process, use that data for downstream processes and systems. So that can then flow into the accounting application. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same. You can have a different application to the policy to accounting, but you're reusing that data, and you've got certainty around that data, and you've got confidence that you can reuse that data. So to my mind, that's kind of what we mean by ecosystems. You have full confidence in data being reused from system to system.
Thanks, James. And we've all kind of answered this question. Craig talked about portability, Keith, portability, access to insight and data. You know, we talk often at NOVIDEA around, you know, the broker on the move. What do you see as the catalyst for change? It was nice to see in the polls people were moving, you know, had great ambitions to move. But what do you see as a catalyst? And that goes to everyone on the webinar as well. As I say, it'd be great to get some more questions in the chat and get your views on what the catalyst for change is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that, or I think people have had for a long time the kind of a digital strategy in place, and I don't think those catalysts have necessarily changed. I think providing information or better service to clients and fast service to clients and agility are all good things. What we've seen is an acceleration of that, and kind of any webinar or conversation where COVID doesn't come up at the moment, but we've clearly seen that has had an impact. And so a digital strategy which may have been in place has often then been kind of accelerated. And the key thing to that is people wanting to have accessibility, or it is remote working in every sense of the word, and not having to rely, as Keith mentioned, sort of physical locations as such. So we have seen a number of clients that we're working with that you know, we were talking about activities for the kind of next year or even the year after, where they were moving to the cloud. We've seen those kind of being put up the agenda and you know, move forward significantly because of the changing work practices that we're all experiencing at the moment.
Sure, very good answer. So I'll ask Keith the question: what's stopping from people doing it today? You know, we've all talked about the benefits. The poll has shown that everybody wants to move. What's stopping people in your view? And then I'll ask the same question of you, James.
Yeah, I think, well, looking at the poll, everyone's on the number 3, so that's really good. I think, you know, 18 months, 2 years ago, it would be interesting to do the poll then. From my experiences, it's been a number of things. Some has been, and it will depend on the businesses. Some has been it's the traditional way I've always done things. So, you know, just like Lloyd's has struggled, and I don't want to get into the Lloyd's Tom debates for years, but just like they've struggled to kind of push that straight through process and electronic processing, I think some of it has been people don't know where to start, don't know what to look at, especially when you look at London market. You know, there's not many providers out there. I've always said, and hindsight's a great thing, 20 years ago, I wish I did it, there should really be one platform across the insurance market and the broking market that then has the underwriting capabilities, the broking capabilities, even the London market, and you just turn on these modules. So yeah, I think it's don't know where to start sometimes. It's who is the right partner, and that's the $1 million question all the time. And I think it's also, how do I do it? You know, how do I get there? Do I big bang it? Do I just proof of concept it in a small environment? I think the hearts and minds things probably shifted in the last 5 or 6 years. You know, before it was the where's my data, what do I need to worry about, security and everything. There's a different stance for IT operations, because I think they need a different view on how they manage those environments. But I think more it's the how, the why, what's the benefits, and I guess who do I partner with to get to that level. Okay,
and then just follow from that, Keith. What would your sort of practical advice be for somebody moving from a 1 to an 8? As you've gone on that journey, you know, with at least a large significant part of your business.
One thing we've learned from the infrastructure, so the infrastructure move is that cost optimization. You know, how do I make the most out of where it is? Going back to the IT ops point, you know, how do we view things? We can't view things that lights were left on 24/7 and all we paid for was electricity. It's different now. So I think it's that. I think practical advice is research, but then, you know, that's an infinite piece of string. I think it's trying to understand the rest of your business, you know, the rest of the stack, the rest of the environment, and how will it talk to each other. And ultimately, what are those end goals? You know, for us, it's about data, it's about insight. that's a slight culture change to where some of us are used to, because we don't capture all of that data up front at the moment. So there's some challenges around how do we get there. But when we've got that, there's going to be some significant kind of benefits. So it's kind of painting that vision and that picture. And I think it's also another thing we've learned is how do we get, if we have an application like NOVIDEA, how do we get that talking to either other application, cloud-based applications, whether they're a 6 or an 8, and how do we integrate with Lloyd, which is why, again, with Webcon, etc. So it's trying to work that out and have that, I guess, architectural picture, and then how do I do the business change? Who do I involve internally in the business? Do I bring in external people? Do I bring in the business? And obviously that disrupts the business through periods of time. And then how do I backfill those positions when they are brought into the relevant projects?
And same question to you, Craig. What was your thoughts there?
I agree with everything Keith said. I think some great insights there from Keith. It was great. You need to decide what you want to own. What's your goal here, right? People don't spend money to go into the cloud for no reason. It enables a shift in thinking. It enables a new flexibility, a new agility. And you need to have a think about, what does that mean to your organization? What should your organization look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or even just 2 years from now, actually. If there's a lot of resistance, making those baby steps makes an awful lot of sense. If actually you just want to do your business, and it's about finding the right partner to look after all the IT, you can make a bigger step. It's about finding a different partner that can take you that leap further. To some degree, though, there isn't one right answer here. It comes down to, where are you today? Where do you want to be? And what is a reasonable pace of change for you as well?
Okay, thank you. And a question to Craig. I know my point of view on this, but do you ultimately need to get to be an 8? Or is it fine to have a mix of different applications depending on how core they are to your business and their need? Obviously, there's some business you want to scale and you want to get economies of scale, and you need the robustness and security, and some pieces of some technology could just be very bespoke and used by a smaller part of your business and perhaps not carry the same priority.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for any organization that's been around a little while, I mean, if you're thinking about some of the insurtech we mentioned, and startup that's been younger than 2 years, they could well aspire to be, everything's on an 8. We have no infrastructure. We've got the right partners. We've glued them together. But anyone who's been around for any amount of time, we all accrue a little baggage over time, maybe a little more over the pandemic as well. So it's fine to have things at different levels. The key here is really to understand what's differentiating for you. Where do you need to focus? What's really important? If you've got something that's on a 3, but actually it does a little job and it's not getting in the way of the customer, it's not getting in the way of things, and you've got other priorities that are more important to you, to your business, to the customers, that's fine. Prioritize those. I don't think this is a place where there's value in being a zealot and pushing everything as far as you can.
Okay, so I'm going to ask James a quick question just around how he sees the need to change and what are the challenges. Then I know we're running out of time a little bit, so I'd love to get Shirley to do that second poll. It'd be great to see how people, hopefully, if we've influenced in a little way people's views in the last 50 minutes. I'll pass to James just to get your sort of overview of things. Yeah,
I think we touched on some of the historic challenges that have been around security, and I think that myth or that sort of perception has now gone away. In fact, I think the reverse is true. I think that you'll now get a much better security with your model, or your cloud model, than you do with sort of on-premise, just because of how things, how you can respond to either threats or detections or the analysis that's coming up. So I think the security piece has clearly been sort of asked and answered. I then think it's probably a kind of confidence piece. So you look at where you're going to get the most impact, you know, for the business, and the most benefit for the business, and then sort of almost test that and prove it, and then sort of move from there. I don't necessarily think that everyone's going to put, you know, their entire systems in the cloud from day one and expect it all to kind of work. I think there is, and once we've answered the security piece and move from there, just need to kind of, you know, sandbox certain areas, get those proven, and then grow it from that way. But and also, you know, take the experience of people that have done it. I mean, that's, you know, there are people now clearly that are on that journey, and kind of, you know, listen to them from their experiences and learn from that.
Great, thanks, James. And as we're coming towards the hour, and I appreciate I've changed the questions a little bit just to get through it. So well done, panelists, for not being so flustered by that. All did great. I suppose, you know, if Shirley, if we could share that poll, please, the second poll, it'd be wonderful to do that. So yes, how's it changed? What level would you like to aim for now? And hopefully we've not made you all regress back down to our 1 again. Thanks everyone for that. So Craig, it looks like there's been a little bit more of a shift down towards 8 again. So hopefully it's raised some good thoughts today.
I think so. And I mean, at the beginning of that, the few answers on the hosting in the cloud were the level 3 there were the ones that were ahead. And I was sort of like, everyone wants to take baby steps, but it's interesting to see it as we got all the answers in. Absolutely. I mean, there's advantages in being, and trade-offs in being in different places, but I think for many of the audience, clearly a shift towards 6, 7, and 8 there, with 8 in the lead.
Great. And if anybody has, I mean, one of the things we touched on quite a few times, I think all the parties on this is again that classic build versus buy. And you know, we obviously went with Salesforce, NOVIDEA, and as our sort of platform, and built a broking platform on it. But as you're going on this journey, it's you know, we call it big technology, and we see lots of value in you investing in a technology, building in a technology that's constantly investing and, you know, keeping performance, scale, and compliance, and all of those things. But there are other routes, obviously, to getting on cloud. So if people have questions from any of the panelists, I say I think we'll run out of time today, but we'll respond to all of the questions. Okay, so if I could just pick up some of the questions in the chat, I think it'd be a good time to do that. Leanne, yes, let us do that. I don't know if Craig, you want to have a go at answering some of these as our keynotes. Cool,
go on. Okay, so there was a question that came through around in terms of cloud terminology, looking at truly SaaS options. Within CELENT, and maybe this is a parochial view, within CELENT, when people were talking about software as a service, what we've seen in the insurance industry is that seemed to be decoupled from cloud. It seemed almost to be a commercial proposition, actually. And we've seen some of the vendors in the insurance industry offering AS400 type systems on a software as a service basis. So that's why we didn't reference it. We can spend a little bit of time talking about the kind of single code base, multi-tenancy, this idea of being evergreen and always on the latest upgrade. And certainly as you get near 7 and 8, everyone typically is on the latest version of the software, much as you hear here from NOVIDEA. But yeah, if somebody comes knocking on the door and saying we're having a SaaS solution, don't assume that is cloud native, because as I say, I've seen mainframe systems offered as a software as a service solution as well.
And a final question there, which would be great for Craig and Keith to answer. Pamela's asked the question, if our application is on Azure, what level are we on? And that is exactly the sort of question that people are asking, which is why you wrote this paper, which is why we set up this webinar. And it would be great to get both your views, and obviously James as well. And it would probably be a nice way to end the session.
Okay, cool. I can start with that one if you like. So I've seen applications built with where they've just lifted something that and then dropped it into Azure, right? And Azure was just another hosting environment. So that's a level 3. I've also seen people who have gone deep into thinking about containerization, being very open source oriented, and being able to support deploying their application on Azure or AWS, Google Cloud, Alibaba if you're over in China, multitude of partners. And that's more kind of like that level 5 that we were talking about there as well. And I've seen other folks, particularly insurers, who are looking at, well, we want to go deep in Azure. We believe in Microsoft and their vision. We're going to use some of their data warehouse technology, and that starts to move beyond 5 and up and into there, where it's starting to leverage the whole of the Azure cloud as a platform. So we're on Azure. Which level are we? Very difficult to answer, to be honest. I'm afraid. But
over to Keith.
I think it's fair to say, if your application's on Azure and they're still talking about servers, then it's clearly a 3. So it's as if they've lifted and shifted to infrastructure as a service. If they're talking about web apps and SQL as a service and platform as a service and any data lakes, anything like that, you're probably looking at a 5 now.
Excellent. Well, thanks ever so much, guys. We've just run over the hour. Thanks again to our panelists and NOVIDEA Marketing for setting this all up. And yeah, we'll make sure recordings are available of this, and we'll also be following up with various pieces of information, and always obviously available for questions. So thanks ever so much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.